At 48 years old, the mother of gospel star Tasha Cobbs Leonard opened up with a confession that nobody had expected, and you won't believe how heavy this truth was. For so many years, she stood beside her daughter, always looking strong, always looking like the woman who could never be shaken. People admired her just as much as they admired Tasha, but here's the shocking part. Behind that smile was a secret that was kept in silence for decades. This was not just a small hidden detail. This was something that changed the way Tasha saw her own life and her own mother. The moment she spoke, it was as if destiny took an unexpected turn. The news did not explode at once. It started quietly, almost like a whisper, when she shared her pain during what people thought was just a normal family moment. But when the words came out, they carried the weight of years and years of silence. Fans who heard about it could not believe it. They kept asking themselves, how could the woman who always stood as the strong pillar of her family, the one who was the backbone of Tasha's journey, have been carrying such a heartbreaking struggle? Social media erupted with mixed feelings. Some praised her courage, saying it took real strength to admit the truth, while others were left in pure disbelief. The hashtags with Tasha Cobbs Leonard's name and devastating truth started trending, and everyone wanted to know more. For Tasha, this confession was more than shocking. It shook the ground she was standing on. She had grown up believing her mother was the safe place, the one who never broke, the one who gave her all the strength she needed to rise in gospel music. But this was where it gets interesting, because the story she heard from her mother made her realize she had not known everything. The woman who shaped her childhood, who sacrificed so much, was also carrying a pain that almost consumed her. What makes this story different is that the battles Tasha thought were hers alone, like depression and personal struggles, were actually connected to her mother's own hidden pain. The mother's life was not the picture-perfect story that many outsiders had imagined. She grew up in the church, served faithfully, and supported her husband while raising her children. To the public, she was the strong church mother, the woman who had it all under control. But the craziest part was that she often cried silently, carrying scars nobody else could see. She encouraged others while she was exhausted herself. People close to the family later remembered moments when she looked tired, broken, yet still gave her smile to others. Everyone thought she was the safe place for them, but nobody ever asked who was her safe place. And that question, hidden for years, finally came crashing into reality when she decided she could no longer hide her truth at 48. She admitted that for decades she had been living in silent endurance. And let me tell you, the details of her story were even more heartbreaking than anyone expected. In her 20s and 30s, she faced financial struggles that drained her completely. The ministry work that she and her husband carried left her tired and empty, and there were betrayals that cut her so deep she never fully healed from them. But here's the shocking part. While everyone around her thought she was strong and unshakable, inside, she was falling apart. She smiled when she was breaking. She encouraged others while she was desperate for encouragement herself. And she gave out love when she was craving to receive it. Every action that looked like strength was actually her way of surviving. This is where it gets interesting, because when she opened up to Tasha, she admitted that many of the choices she had made as a wife and mother were not just out of selflessness, but out of necessity. They were her way of keeping the family together, even while she felt like she was slipping away. And destiny took an unexpected turn during that moment. The mother, who had always been seen as the strongest one in the family, became the most vulnerable one. With tears running down her face, she whispered to Tasha, "We hid it for years." Those words hit Tasha like thunder. For the first time in her life, she realized her mother's sacrifices were not just acts of love, they were also acts of survival. Tasha sat in silence, shocked, as the woman she admired more than anyone else finally showed her true pain. The roles had reversed. The mother was no longer the one holding her daughter's hand. It was the daughter who now had to comfort her mother. What makes this story different is that Tasha had often spoken about her own battles with depression, but she never knew her mother carried similar scars. It was a generational echo, a hidden chain of pain passed silently from mother to daughter. And in that moment, both of them realized that this silence had been shaping their lives for years. The craziest part was that outsiders had always suspected something. Whispers surrounded the Cobbs family. People spoke quietly about financial hardships, about her looking tired in church, about moments of grief that no one could fully explain. Some had even seen her crying alone after services, long after everyone else had gone home. But nobody ever dared to ask why. Nobody imagined the depth of the struggle she carried inside. It was only at 48, when the secret became unbearable, that the truth finally came out. And once it did, there was no going back. The moment her confession reached beyond the family, the reaction was overwhelming. Fans could not stop talking about it, and gospel insiders began sharing their thoughts. Social media filled with shock, disbelief, and admiration. But here is the shocking part. Many people said her story felt like their own, like someone had finally put words to the pain they had been hiding too. Hashtags with Tasha's name and her mother's revelation spread quickly, and the news was no longer just about one family. It became a conversation about hidden struggles in families everywhere. Some fans said they cried when they read about it. Others praised her courage, saying it was rare to see such honesty in the world of gospel music, where everything always seemed perfect from the outside. This is how the confession changed not only the way people saw Tasha's mother, but also how they saw Tasha herself. Her music, her worship, her emotional performances now carried a deeper meaning. Songs like Break Every Chain and Gracefully Broken suddenly felt more personal to listeners, as if the passion in her voice was not just about faith, but also about pain she inherited from her mother's silent struggles. And this is where it gets interesting, because it wasn't only fans who reacted. Fellow gospel artists like Kirk Franklin and CeCe Winans spoke out publicly. CeCe called it an act of healing and said, "Thank you for showing us the power of vulnerability." Kirk Franklin added that behind every strong artist is a story we don't know. These reactions only added more weight to the confession, proving that her words had touched even those who knew the cost of keeping up an image in the gospel world. What makes this story different is the way it sparked healing even within the Cobbs family. Tasha's husband, Kenneth Leonard, openly praised his mother-in-law, saying generational chains are breaking. That statement itself showed how powerful the confession was. It was not just a release of pain, but the beginning of healing for the entire family. For Tasha, it was painful to process, but also freeing. She admitted that she finally saw her mother not as a flawless figure, but as a human being who had survived deep wounds. The craziest part was that this very moment of brokenness was what brought them closer than ever before. Fans continued to pour in messages, saying her mother's story reminded them of their own mothers, or of struggles in their own families that had never been spoken out loud. People were inspired, some even saying that her bravery had given them the courage to finally share their own truth. Destiny took an unexpected turn again, because what was meant to be a personal confession inside the family became a message that was healing strangers everywhere. It was proof that when truth is revealed, it doesn't just set one person free. It opens the door for many others to finally speak out. As time passed, the weight of her confession continued to reshape everything around her. For the first time, Tasha's mother began to speak openly about the importance of honesty, therapy, and community. She admitted that silence had been her prison, and breaking it was the only way to finally breathe freely. And let me tell you, her decision to speak did not just free her, it started a chain reaction. People in churches, families, and even in the wider gospel community began sharing their own hidden struggles. This is how her single confession turned into a movement of truth and healing. But here is the shocking part. While many people embraced her vulnerability, there were also those who struggled with it. Some were not ready to see their role model as human and broken. Some wanted to keep the perfect picture of strength, untouched by reality. Yet, this is where it gets interesting because the truth refused to be silenced again. Once it was out, there was no way to go back to the polished image of perfection. Instead, the story now became about resilience, survival, and the courage to admit pain, even in a world that celebrates strength. What makes this story different is how it transformed the meaning of gospel music itself. Fans began listening to Tasha's songs with new ears. Every lyric about chains breaking or grace in brokenness now felt rooted in a deeper reality. The craziest part was that people said they connected not just with Tasha's voice, but with the unspoken voice of her mother behind it, the woman who had endured silently for decades. The image of strength was no longer about someone who never fell, but about someone who fell and stood back up again. Destiny took an unexpected turn for the Cobbs family. What was once a hidden pain became the testimony that inspired thousands. Tasha herself admitted that her mother's words reframed her entire childhood and gave her a new lens for her own ministry. For the family, it was bittersweet but freeing. And for the gospel world, it was a reminder that even the strongest pillars can crack, and that sometimes those cracks are what allow the light to shine through. In the end, the confession of Tasha's mother at 48 years old was not just her story, it became a universal truth. It showed that behind every strong face, there could be hidden pain. Behind every inspiring song, there could be unspoken struggles. And behind every perfect picture, there could be scars we cannot see. So now the question remains, will this moment push others in gospel music to open up about their own hidden battles? Or will some continue to hide behind silence and perfection? One thing was certain, the truth had been spoken, and it could never be buried again. Even after all the noise and emotions that followed the confession, the story did not fade away. In fact, it kept growing, pulling more people into its circle. Fans began digging deeper into Tasha's music, connecting every word she had ever sung with her mother's hidden truth. And you won't believe how much meaning people started to find in songs they had listened to for years. For them, Break Every Chain was no longer just a song of worship. It became a song about a family breaking free from silence. Gracefully Broken was no longer just a melody. It was a picture of her mother's tears and the courage it took to finally speak. But here's the shocking part. This revelation also forced the gospel world to look at itself differently. For so long, people had believed that showing pain was a sign of weakness, but now they were seeing that admitting pain was a new kind of strength. This is where it gets interesting because conversations began to rise about how churches and gospel spaces often hide struggles behind smiles and polished performances. People asked how many others are still hiding, how many other mothers, fathers, singers, and leaders are quietly breaking behind the scenes. The craziest part was that leaders who had never shared anything personal before began hinting at their own struggles. Tasha's mother had unknowingly started a wave, proving that one voice could inspire thousands. What makes this story different is how it touched not just fans or churchgoers, but families across the world. Messages poured in from women saying they finally told their children about the hardships they had been hiding. Men admitted to carrying silent battles they had never shared. And in all of this, the Cobbs family realized that their pain had become a tool for healing far beyond their home. Destiny took an unexpected turn yet again, because what started as one woman's confession at 48 had grown into a symbol of freedom for many others. And so, while the initial moment was filled with shock and tears, its lasting effect was filled with hope and release. The truth had broken chains, and it had shown the world that even when life looks perfect from the outside, there is always more behind the story. One confession changed everything, and it reminded everyone that silence may last for years, but truth always finds its way out.